So, have you ever been scrolling on your social media and you see a picture that just absolutely blows your mind? And then you're like, man, I'm a photographer. I could go out and take that same picture and edit it the same exact way. And then you go out and you take a picture that you think is really good. You come home, you throw it in Lightroom, and you're ready to edit. And then you realize, man, this picture is nowhere near close to what those people on Instagram are able to create. Hi, my name is Matthew. And today I'm going to show you how to create those images just like your favorite content creators on Instagram and on other social media platforms. A lot of photography, almost 50% or more, has to do with editing. You can take a really, really stellar picture, but not know that it's really stellar until later on. And I'm going to teach you how to bring out those aspects of an image that actually make your photos good. So the first step in this progress, obviously, is going to shoot pictures. So I'm actually going to head out with my friends right now, and we're going to go take some pictures, and I'll show a little bit of my process in taking pictures. Not a whole lot. I'll do a separate shooting video another day. But I've had a lot of you ask me to do tutorials on how I like to edit my images. So we're going to go out and shoot some pictures really fast. I'm going to come back, and then I will show you guys how to get into that editing process and how to start making your images absolutely pop. So I really want one here, and I want one right here, with the window as like a frame. Yeah. Okay, we got a model, bro. That actually looks sick. Yeah. So now we're gonna get some like foreground in the shot, get the top layer, just make sure to get some of that graffiti in there. And the camera's gonna autofocus right there. I'm actually gonna turn up my brightness just a little bit so we have it a little more evenly exposed. My shutter speed's right at 1/125 because I want to make sure that there's not any motion blur in the shot. And I'm gonna go ahead and focus right on his head right there. He's kind of on the rule of thirds so that so it's more of it pulls your eye in where it needs to be when your subject is on the rule of thirds. And then he's looking towards the right side, so you want to put him on the left side of the rule of thirds. Okay, we're back, and I've loaded up Lightroom with all of the pictures that I took out on this outing with my friends. I'm going to go ahead and give them star ratings so that I know which ones that we're going to be working with today. And we'll start the editing process. So we'll swap over to the screen recording on my computer right now. So in Lightroom, we're gonna go ahead and go to the develop page. And first thing we're gonna do here is you can obviously see with this image that it's slightly crooked. You can kind of just tell. And a lot of people like to come in here and hit the auto button. I don't trust auto as much in landscape photography. And this isn't necessarily a landscape, so it'll work fine. But just because it doesn't really know what the horizon line is necessarily. And so it kind of guesses. And here with this portrait that I have of me, it does a little bit of a better job because it lines the lines up. So you can see there's a lot of horizontal lines in this picture. And it lines those up pretty well. So it looks like it did a pretty decent job there with auto. I want to go slightly more to the right, tilt it a little bit more to the right, just so we have it a little more straight on. We'll go full screen, and still it looks a little crooked to me, especially the subject. So I'm gonna move it a little bit more and then check it out there, and it looks perfectly straight to me right there. Typically, when I'm editing, I like to switch this to landscape, because it gives me better colors than just the Adobe color profile would. However, I will say that the problem with that is typically when you switch to the landscape profile on Lightroom, your skin colors aren't nearly as clean, and you have a lot more of the red tones in people's skin color like pop out in the image. And so it makes people, or it can make people look really funny. It actually didn't really do a horrible job with me here, so I don't absolutely hate it. And it made the colors look a little bit better, just to start right off the bat. The next thing I really like to do in these images is I'm just gonna go ahead and hit auto. And what that does is that adjusts the exposure for me to kind of give the image a balanced look when it comes to the lighting. And I don't really exactly love what it did with the auto setting here. I think that it's a little too bright, and I kind of want to go a little more moody in this image. And so right now, if I'm looking at it, well, first thing is I never use this contrast slider. This is a big problem, is the contrast slider isn't great at color management. And so it makes your colors look really funny. So I'm gonna go ahead and set that right to 0, and we'll work on adding in contrast to the image here in a second. The first thing I notice is the whites are quite bright here. So I'm actually gonna take, I do like where they're at with the snow color. I think my shadows have been brought up a little too much. So I'm gonna bring that down slightly, probably about right there. And then, let's see. I do like where it put the exposure. The exposure looks pretty nice. It's pretty balanced. The blacks, here's a little tip for you guys. If you go ahead and hit J on your keyboard, it'll show you the parts of the image that are too underexposed or overexposed, that it's losing detail. So you can see in the blacks right here, it's a little too dark. And it looks like my highlights are completely fine. I'm not losing any highlights in the image. So I'm actually gonna bring the blacks up just slightly, just so we don't lose any of that detail. Okay, so most of the time in my pictures, I don't really care too much if maybe I'm losing a little bit of detail in the blacks, as you are right here. I honestly like the contrast that it adds to things, because in real life, I don't think you're able to see all of the detail, especially when things are dark. And so sometimes I do like to lose just a little bit of detail. I don't pay too much attention to it, and I don't try and correct for it all the time. So if we pull the blacks up here, it's still saying that I'm losing detail, which probably means my shadows are a little too dark, which is interesting. Yeah, so if I bring the shadows up, it still says I'm losing detail, which is kind of weird, but we're not going to worry about that too much right now. So let's go ahead and I'm going to check out here how dark I want my image to be. I'm going to go ahead and hit J, make sure that I can see it. And I think that looks about good right there. Maybe a little darker actually. We're gonna go -11 because I liked where that was at there. -10. Okay, so now we've kind of corrected all of these little the sliders for our exposure. I think the whites look great. It makes the snow kind of pop out or stand out, and everything's looking pretty solid in the image so far without masking anything. One thing that I noticed as I was zooming in here is you have all of these spots in the image from the snow falling actually during this. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go here to the remove tool. And we're going to go right to masking, and I'm going to take out those spots. So what you do here is we hit instead of hitting the remove tool, I'm going to go to the heal tool, and you hover over the parts of the image that you want edited slightly so it looks a little bit better. And then you tap it and it should just take care of it for you. Sometimes it's a little finicky, but with these it should be completely fine. Okay, next thing, I'm gonna go ahead and move to masks, and then we'll worry about the rest of this later. So let's jump over to the masks tab here. The first mask generally I always do on images or on my pictures is this radial gradient. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to place a radial gradient over my subject, and right about there, so it has a little bit of wiggle room with the feathering. Bring the feathering out to here. I'm going to go ahead and zoom out here and make sure that this is outside of the picture. Place it right there, and then I'm going to hit invert. And what this does is instead of light coming from that radial gradient, it's going to act as if that spot in the middle should be the brightest part of the image, and then the rest around it is going to be darker. And what this does is it creates a little bit more of a natural vignette instead of using the vignette slider. to pull your eyes into the image. Typically when you're doing photography, your job is to lead the audience to the thing that you want them to see. And this includes landscape photography as well. You take this image and you direct their eyes to the specific parts of the image that are interesting. And that is ultimately what creates a nice photograph. So here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to decrease the exposure just a little bit. So we have this little bit of darkness on the edges of the image that pulls your eyes in here. And actually, it didn't do a great job on the side, so I'll probably use a linear gradient here soon to kind of correct for that. But I don't want it to be too dark. I kind of just want it a little bit so that it's natural and so it's not overdone. Because if it's overdone, it's super noticeable and people really pick up on it. So now that looks a little more natural. If we hit F to go into full screen, we can kind of see there it's not too overbearing and it's looking good. I'm going to go to the presence section or the effects section, and I'm going to drop the clarity down just a little bit. And this also adds to that effect of pulling your viewer's eyes into the subject. It kind of blurs those edges, if you can see that, and makes it a little less clear. Now, what I'm going to do is I always like to create a little either people or subject mask if you have people in a picture. And as you can see here, when I do the subject mask, it kind of masks all of the parts of the image that are the most sharp. And I don't really love that, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that mask and try to select people instead and see what it does. And it says there's no people found, so create a subject mask again. And as you can see, my boot's not quite in that mask, and all of this other part of the image that I don't want is in that as well. So I'm going to go ahead and hit subtract down here and then hit brush. And what this will end up doing is I can take out those parts of the image that I don't want masked with my brush tool, and then we can focus directly on the subject, which is me in this picture. Now that I hit show overlay, I still see that my boot is not quite in the mask. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the mask again, mask number 2. I'm going to hit add, and I'm going to go object. Now this is your object selection tool. Down here you have 2 modes. You have a brush mode and you have a, I don't know what to call this, a selector mode, a rectangle mode. And so I'm going to go ahead and use the rectangle to hover over my boot, and it should just fill in the boot right there instead of having to brush it on. So now we have my mask on my subject, and it looks like there might potentially, yeah, there's a little bit of mask left on these areas. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that. So now that I have my subject mask, I can do a lot of things with this. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and hit duplicate and invert mask right here. And what that'll do is that'll create the exact opposite of what that mask was, except this time it didn't quite get that. And I think that's because the boot isn't quite selected. So we're going to go to mask 2 and hit add objects and then add the full boot into this. So now it should be completely full. I'm going to delete the inverted mask that we just created and then do the same exact thing again, duplicate and invert mask. And now it's a little better, a little more clean. There's parts of me that's not quite sharp there. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract. Okay, now I'm going to go back to my subject mask. And typically with your subject, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at me really fast and see what can be done. I'd like to add a little bit of sharpness, maybe a little bit of texture to me, because I'm so far away in the image. It's really important that becomes that I am the subject. And so adding just a little bit of texture and sharpness will help the image to look a little bit better. So I'm going to go down here to the sharpness area on the mask. And if you hold down, actually I'm just going to add a little bit of sharpness and then go up to the texture part of the mask and add just a little bit of texture, not too much because it looks like it might get overdone if I do it too much. Okay, so not really much there. I also think I want to increase the exposure on me just slightly, maybe drop the shadows instead of increase the exposure. Yeah, or bring up the shadows. Yep, so typically when you have a subject, you want, obviously, it's the same rule that I've been talking about this entire time. You want that subject to be brighter than the rest of the image, so like your eye is drawn to them. So just increasing the brightness just a little bit and hit a linear gradient really fast. And we're gonna just go right from the bottom to start. And I do like how dark it is currently, but I wanna add a little bit more darkness to it to kind of pull your eyes in just slightly more, and maybe drop some more texture from that, so your eyes don't get pulled into that right now or when you first see the picture. Then I'm going to add a linear gradient from the side, about right there, and then another one from the other side, about there. And with the first one, well, with both of them, we're going to do about the same exact thing, but I'm just going to drop the exposure down just a little bit. Same principle here, just pulling your eyes into the subject right there, and that already looks better from the original. So now if we take a look at our image, if we hit the backslash button on our keyboard, you can see the original, what it looks like, and what it looks like now. If you want to see before and after masks, you have this little eye right here. Hit before and after, and you can see you can see our subject quite a bit better. It pulls your eyes right into me in this picture, and it's already helping this picture to be better. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and play with the temperature just a little bit to see how we like it. I really like the warmer vibes of this image, and I know it's shot in the cold, and so it should be a little cooler, but I like it when it's warmed up a little bit more. We're going to warm it up just slightly on our white balance slider there, and then I'm going to go ahead and take a radial gradient. And this is something I like to do in a lot of my pictures, and it's one of the more fake things that I do. I don't ever use Photoshop. I don't know how to use Photoshop, but something that I really enjoy doing is adding a fake sun into my pictures. It's a little silly, but if you take a radial gradient, you can actually use it to mimic sunlight, and it's also something that helps you to focus on your subject. So I'm going to go just like that with a radial gradient, and we're going to act as if sun is coming in through the top here. So now that I have my radial gradient, I'm going to increase the exposure like that, and I might move this over just slightly. Yep, so it's like kind of directed right on me right there. And after I increase my exposure, sunlight is warm, so I'm going to increase the temperature of it too. So now it looks a little more like sunlight. And then the two other things we need to do with this is we need to drop the clarity, so it looks a little more dreamy, and then the haze. And that looks pretty much like sunlight. It's not as clean as I'd like it. I'd actually want the light to come over a little bit more probably, so I'm going to expand it. And then we're going to go ahead and turn that mask off and on to see kind of what it looks like there. Looking pretty good. I'm going to pull this off me just a little bit more right there. I'm going to go ahead and do a radial gradient over here in the image as well. And then, okay, now that we have that, same thing, gonna take this mask. It's still that's fine, okay. I'm gonna take this mask and increase the exposure like we were doing before, increase the temperature to about 37, which is the same as the other one, and then drop the clarity and drop the dehaze. So you have a little bit of haze coming in through that back window as well. So now if we look at our before and after, that's what we got going on. And so far I really like how this is turning out. I might get rid of the sunlight on this part because it is distracting me just a little bit. And then we're gonna add another radial gradient here, just on me. Just a slight exposure increase. See what it looks like. And I do like what that did. Yeah. Okay, awesome. Now, generally in my editing process, where I would go next is I would go to my actual color grading with the shadow, with the HSL tab, or with the HSL section, and the shadows, the mids, and the highlights wheels. So we're going to go ahead and jump down there. There's not a whole lot I want to change on this image about those, because it's a very colorful image and we do want all of those colors in this picture. I don't think I'll mess with it too much. As far as the tone curve, I'm probably going to move this a little bit. So this, your tone curve, if you select this section right here, I'm not sure, your point curve, this is where you add contrast in the image. And the picture is already quite contrasty, but I just want to add just a slight bit more. So right here is your black point. I'm going to go ahead and move the black point just a little bit more to the right, probably about right there. That looks good. And then my whites, I'm going to move to the left, just ever so slightly. And then if we look at the difference in the image right there, you can see just a little bit more contrast, a little bit darker darks, a little bit brighter brights. And then here, generally what I like to do is something called an S curve. And it's because it moves the graph here in the shape of an S. So what you do for that is you bring your shadows, which is this section right here, from here down just slightly. And then your highlights up here at the top, add a point, and then just move it slightly up. And there's your before and after on the image. I do think this is a little too contrasty. I think the colors pop just a little too much for my liking. So I'm going to go down here to the shadows that I adjusted, and I'm going to use my arrow keys. You can see where it says up here in this corner, it says 69/61. I'm going to move it up just a little bit. 65. I kind of like where it's sitting at 64. So 64, and then right here, 190/194. I'm going to drop, you know what, I like it, 192. That looks about good to me. And then you can see the contrast is added in the image. It looks more realistic and cinematic. Okay, awesome. So one of the last things we're going to go ahead and do is jump down to this color grading section of Lightroom. And generally with my pictures, I like to add teal to the shadows and orange to the mids and the highlights. This is something that's extremely common with cinematography, is this teal and orange look. It's also extremely common in photo editing because it makes your pictures generally look a little cleaner. There's just a nice cinematic tone and vibe to your pictures when you do this. For this picture, I might not, for the final product, keep that because there's so many colors that it might just clash with everything. So right here in the shadows section, if we increase the shadows slightly towards teal, which is this part of the color wheel, and then we go up to our highlights, we can select orange and then increase the orange a little bit. And what you'll see there is it created like more of this uniform color vibe, whereas before you have a lot of these clashing colors. Now in the shadows and the highlights especially, you have this complementary colors, or these complementary colors, the blue or the teal and the orange, the blue and the orange, that makes the image feel a little nicer and more appealing. As far as adding orange to the mids, generally you would probably do that a little bit depending on the situation. With skin tones it's a little hard because if I add a whole bunch of orange, you can see there, my skin is now orange. So I don't want to add a whole bunch of orange to the mid-tones here. So now you get your before and after on the color mixer, and it's just a little more uniform. I don't know if it's something I'll keep, but just something to keep in mind. And I can show you a good example of that here in a second on another one of my pictures. Okay, so we're back at our picture that we're working on right now. One thing I don't love so much about this picture is the fact that there's a good amount of red in my face. There is, like, naturally I do have red right here, but I don't like how this red is almost blending in with the walls. And so what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go to my subject mask, which is right here, I believe, and go down to this point color section. And you can go ahead and take that color out of that specific mask and desaturate it just slightly, or even change the hue of it. So I'm going to play around with this for a second, see what I like. So to fix that, we're going to hit Visualize Range, and then it'll show me everything that I selected. And then we're going to drop the range down a little bit more, and now it's just selecting those parts of the image that are more red. So it might brighten, we're not going to worry about the brightness. Just desaturate just slightly. Right there, looks about good to me. And so that should separate me a little bit more from the wall, so it's not the same color, which I appreciate. We don't really have any noise. We're not going to worry about denoising today. I'm going to hit Remove Chromatic Aberration just in case there's any problems in the picture, and we are good to go with this picture. So that's all that I really needed to do here. I hope that these tips and tricks in this tutorial has been helpful to you. If you want to see more of these tutorials, if you want to see some more shooting tutorials, like actually going out and taking the pictures, if you want to see everything else that I do as a photographer, feel free to subscribe and leave a like and comment. If you have any questions, please comment, and I will get to your questions and try to answer them to the best of my ability in a video or right in the comment section if it's applicable. I hope you guys have had a great day, and I will talk to you soon.